Good evening, everybody. My name is Cindy Green. I am the Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning for the Madison Metropolitan School District. Thank you for being here this evening. Thank you for taking time out of your day to come and to listen to us to talk about our future referendum and about some of the successes that we have for our school district. A couple of housekeeping items. You have in front of you a note card and a marker that we would like you to use at any point throughout the presentation if you have questions or comments that you would like us to know and or address. If you need more note cards, just raise your hand. We have team members that will be coming around and collecting the note cards. Can that team member raise their hand? We will use those note cards to theme them up or see what the trends are, and we'll provide some responses throughout the time tonight. Some answers may not be given tonight, but we will be providing updates along the way as we continue to provide sessions around the referendum. Before I kick it off to one of our board members, I wanted to acknowledge our principal of Senate Middle School, Dr. Copeland in the house. Woo-hoo! Yes, look at that cheer. I didn't get that cheer. And do we have any other officials in the house that we need to acknowledge before I turn it over to the amazing board member that is here tonight to welcome you also? Okay, so with that, I am going to introduce our board member, Ali Muldrow, to welcome you and say a few words. Come on up. Board member Muldrow, thank you for being here.
Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. I am really excited to answer any questions folks have in terms of the board's decision-making process as it relates to our referendums.
Sorry, ma'am.
That's okay.
Excuse me. I'm going to
Am
stand
I just
there right
welcoming?
there. Yes.
Yeah, my name is Ali Muldrow. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm currently serving my second term on the Board of Education. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to use both.
Yes.
Like I'm very Mike's right now. Yeah, I'm so grateful that we get to be here and have this conversation. Both of these referendums are opportunities to support each other and ourselves and to reinvest in our community. MMSD is the 6th largest employer in Dane County. Our referendums have employed thousands of people and have created opportunities that cannot be measured for our young people over the course of the years. I'm so grateful to this community for passing our two 2020 referendums, and I'm hoping that that same enthusiasm for public education and what our educators and our young people need exists right here and right now.
Thank you so much, Board Member Muldrow. I'm going to steal this mic back. We're just going to have a little moment here, and we are going to kick it off. Thank you so much. All right. We have 3 screens in front of you, just so you know. We have a screen that will be in English, we have a screen in Spanish, and we also have a screen in Hmong to make sure we meet the needs of the members that are here today. So before we talk about the referendum, we wanted to spend a little time grounding in who we are as a district and who we serve. MMSD serves over 25,000 students. As Board Member Muldrow just mentioned, we're the 6th largest employer in the area. We provide services for many students, and we serve over 6,000 staff as well employed in MMSD. MMSD is a very diverse group of students. We have student populations, 19% or 18% of our students that are Black or African American, 7% Asian, 25% of our students are Hispanic, 39% white, and 10% are 2 or more races. We have many student demographics that we serve, a beautiful population. In addition to that, 47% of our student population come from homes that are economically disadvantaged or homes that come from low-income backgrounds, and 27% of our student population are English learners. MMSD is a place of excellence. a place of excellence. We have many things that we can be proud of, many things that the 2020 referendum afforded us, but here's just a few highlights. Across our school district, we have 21 of our schools that offer dual language immersion programming. When you think about that 27% of our students that are English learners that I just named before, having 21 of our schools offer programming is a really important piece to ensure that our students that need and deserve and have the right to receive services in Spanish is available across our city. So 21 schools have dual language. 61% of our students graduate with some type of college credit. This has grown over the last few years. Some of this is because of the 2020 referendum. I want you to think about that when I talk about 47% of our population comes from low-income backgrounds. That means that these students are able to receive opportunities to earn college credit free of charge while still in high school. That's a game changer for some of our families and for our students, able to earn college credit free of charge with us. 61%. We still have ways to go, but that's a really great start for us. 26 of our students, National Merit Scholars. That is one of the largest around. We have 2024, we had over 4,000 advanced placement tests taken. That also is an opportunity where students are able to earn college credit based on their performance on the exam. That's the most we've had in the last 10 years. We offer full day and half day 4K across 27 of our sites. That has been an investment our board has made over the last few years, something we're really proud of to ensure our families have access to early childhood opportunities while living in Madison. That is also a way to attract new families, free early childhood opportunities, full day and half day for our students. And last, we have students that have access to strings, right? Thinking about how we want our students to be well-rounded, access to different musical and arts programming. So fifth graders all have the opportunity to take strings. Okay, so a few things that you'll hear more about tonight are some areas that we're focused on for the 2024 referendum. While we just mentioned some of the amazing successes we've had in the district, we still know we have opportunities to improve, and some of the areas we want to continue to expand are such of the early learning. We mentioned 27 sites have 4K, either half day or full day. We want to have that at all 32 of our sites if possible. We also know multilingual education is critically important. As I mentioned before, 21 sites have DLI. We also know there's greater needs across our entire city of the students we serve to think about additional expansions of multilingual education. Well-rounded opportunities. The 2020 referendum was able to create new 21st century lab spaces in our 4 comprehensive high schools and Capitol High, which is one of our smaller high schools. Those lab spaces are providing students hands-on experiences for career and technical education. We also have built new theaters and new art spaces. We want to see that in our middle schools and eventually in our elementary schools as well as we continue to think about the next few years in MMSD. And our culture and climate. We want to make sure that every space is physically safe, students feel psychologically safe, students are able to have an environment that provides opportunities for instruction where they can thrive, the lighting, the physical spaces. So that is another area that we are investing in as well. All right. You spoke, we heard you. We had a host of 10 sessions last spring and into the summer to start our conversations around what do people want to know and what do people want to see in this referendum for 2024. We had 4,000 responses through a survey that we sent out. We had 3 superintendent advisory sessions where we brought people together to provide advisement to our superintendent about what we should be thinking about and what we should consider as we move forward with this referendum. And we also had a think tank where we brought community leaders together to also provide input and give us guidance. So before I turn it over to Bob Soldner, who is our Assistant Superintendent of Financial Services, I want to take a minute for us to watch a video. This video is something that I deeply appreciate because it helps to break down the finances and the budget for the state of Wisconsin. I'm from the teaching and learning side of the house, so while yes, math is important, math is not always my strong suit. So when you watch a video like this, it helps to really break it down for you to better understand our current state. With that, I'm going to ask the team to play the video, and I'm going to step out of the way.
Our public schools are the cornerstone of our community. The education and opportunities we provide for students today shape their futures and ours. Schools, like any organization, need money to operate. But in Wisconsin, funding the needs of our schools has been a growing challenge. State policy limits how much school districts can spend. The vast majority of school funding comes from a combination of state dollars and local property taxes. It's called the revenue limit, and it acts as a cap per student that school districts can spend each year. Even if school costs go above this level, schools can't spend any more than this limit. From 1994 to 2009, these revenue caps were adjusted for inflation, which meant they helped schools keep up with ongoing needs. But since 2010, the resources districts need to survive have fallen farther and farther behind the basic costs to operate our schools. By the end of 2025, the revenue limit will have fallen more than $3,300 per student behind inflation. In the Madison Metropolitan School District, with roughly 25,000 students, that's a decrease of more than $82 million. What's more, each district has a different revenue cap, and these caps are not tied to the needs of the students or the costs to the schools that serve them. Our job as a school district is to make sure all of our students have access to the exceptional educational opportunities we provide, no matter what their needs when they walk through our doors. But state funding falls short of what it costs to meet the specific needs of many of our students. When that happens, we have to use money from our general fund to cover the difference, which means taking dollars from other important needs. The largest portion of our budget goes towards staffing. Our people are the heart of our schools. Without enough educators who instruct, support, and inspire learning, schools can't provide the lessons, programs, and opportunities our students deserve. Other important budget items include curriculum, technology, transportation, operations, and maintenance. We work hard to balance our budgets, yet resources for schools have been shrinking year after year since 2010. With costs growing faster than funding, districts are always looking for ways to trim costs and work smarter, like deferring needed school maintenance, cutting programs, reducing staff, and many other strategies. But schools can only cut so much before they start to harm educational opportunities for their students. To maintain class sizes, keep up with rising costs, take care of school buildings, and protect high-quality instruction, many districts have turned to their community to help fill the state-imposed funding gap. Since the arrival of revenue limits, over 80% of school districts have done so by asking local voters to raise their caps through an operational referendum. Most have used the option multiple times. Our children don't have time to wait for state policymakers to fix the school funding system. By putting the needs of our students first, we are investing in their potential and the future of our whole community. Strong schools make strong communities where families want to move and stay. Learn more about school funding by visiting our website.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Bob Soldner. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Financial Services. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about school finance. I want to spend some time explaining to y'all about the revenues and the reason the board has asked for two questions in terms of the referendums. And so first about the video. The video talks about school district revenue limits. And revenue limits in a nutshell have been around since the mid to late 90s. They limit the amount of annual revenues a school board has to fund its operations. And what the law says is about 12 years ago, the law was changed to not allow annual increases to match inflation for the revenues. And so what began, as the revenue was explained in the video, several school boards, including Madison, have gone multiple times to the voters to ask for additional revenues to operate their schools, right? So although revenues haven't increased, sustainable ongoing revenues haven't increased by inflation, our costs have continued to increase by inflation. And so what that results in the board to do is to identify the amount of sustainable ongoing revenues and what is short with continually increasing costs based on inflation. And the board has used one-time funds for that. And so what the legislature has said, although we're not going to match your ongoing revenues to match your ongoing costs, we'll give you an option. You need to go to your voters in referendum. If you want sustainable base growing revenues, you need to ask permission. And that's what the board has done historically. And the Madison community has several times over the last 15 plus years approved additional funds to operate the school district. So that is the system that we're living in, and that is the system that will continue to be in terms of the law. And I like to say that's the law. And as the video pointed out, we're not going to wait for the state legislature to change the law. We're going to address the needs and continue to communicate the needs of the district and let the voters decide if they agree and want to support a referendum or not support a referendum. So now a little bit on the specifics of the revenues where we are at today. 23-24, last school year, and this school year, 24-25, if we would have had inflationary increases in our revenues, we would have generated an additional $30.2 million. Just under $21 million last year and about $9.5 million this year. So that's what we're looking at just in the last 2 years in terms of the need to find ongoing revenues. Talk a little bit more about some of the state and federal laws. I call these funding gaps. Federal law was enacted back in the early 70s called the Individuals with Disability Education Act. And what that law said was students that need special services, individualized education plans, local school districts and states are required to provide them. It's an excellent law. Madison does a wonderful job of providing these educational services for students when they need them at the points of their career when they need them. The federal government first said they'd spend cover about 40% of those costs when the law was passed. For a long time, decades, they've been covering about 10 to 13% of those costs. So what many states did was created state funding to help cover those costs, and state has not kept up with their share in terms of helping districts fund those costs. And so last year, about 31 cents on the dollar was provided by the state, which resulted the district in finding revenues within their budget to meet these much needed and very important services. So that results in us taking $66 million from our fund balance, our general operations, to cover these specific costs. Statewide, that number is $1.5 billion. This is where I'll also remind everybody, the legislature, through state taxes that they've raised, have billions of dollars in their fund balance where they've chosen not to assist school districts in meeting these unmet needs. Services are provided, but the revenues are not from the state side, which is why the board has asked for referendum and the authority to raise additional funds. Now, the final piece in terms of talking about gaps in state law that we have to deal with is, Cindy mentioned the state and Madison School District being one of the leaders, expanding 4-year-old kindergarten. So 4-year-old kindergarten to full day instruction, very important, really helps kids get off to the right start. It's a focus on early literacy and early learning, which is wonderful. So we have full days of costs, but state law says a 4-year-old kindergarten student is only worth 1/2. So even though we have full day costs and full 1.0 students, because they're kids, of course they're 1.0, the state says, nope, We're only going to let you count them as a half a child, which reduces our revenue and creates another gap. I want to talk a little bit about our facilities now, moving into the facilities side of the house. In addition to the money that the district has asked for voters, most recently back in 2020, the voters approved $317 million. Cindy mentioned 4 comprehensive high schools, the creation of a brand new school on the south side, Southside Elementary, the renovation of Hoyt on the west side for Capitol High School. The board has continued to invest separately from their general fund $5 million a year to invest in our facilities, ongoing critical facility improvements and maintenance. Since 2008, the school board has collectively raised $93 million in tax dollars to improve the facilities, 52 school facilities. Okay, now a little bit about the history and the research and data we've done on our existing 52 schools. Last fall, we completed a facility condition report with some independent consultants, experts in the area of facilities, architects, and we determined of 26 of our, I think we evaluated 44 of our schools since we were renovating several of them. 26 of those schools were more than 60 years old, right? What that means is we have some facilities that have outlived their useful life, even with continued maintenance and investment, so far past their useful life that we have mechanical systems that the manufacturers no longer exist, no longer make parts. And so what we're required to do, which we do, is get a hold of tool and die makers, and we have to make our own parts. Make our own parts to repair the boilers, make our own parts to keep the mechanical systems operating. But that's just an indication of age, right? Past the useful life. On top of that, 26 schools being over 60 years, we have 40 schools that have received a C or D grade. You have some materials in front of you specific to Senate Middle School. It'll show that C is the grade that that facility condition report gave to Senate. A little bit later, I want to get more into the specifics of that and how the board used that facility condition report to help guide the path in terms of the $507 million facility referendum question that we'll be looking at. So 40 of them received a C or D. The referendum. 2 referendum questions. One is operations, that is the money we use to attract and retain a diverse workforce, the money we use to provide the educational programming, and a facilities referendum, a $507 million, really the authority to sell bonds to finance the construction and renovation of facilities. 2 separate questions, obviously both related to our district, one for operating and one for repairing facilities. All right. This is going more on the issues that Cindy talked about in terms of the focus and the priorities of the board. And I want to stress that our referendum is much more than just sustaining what we're doing. It's an investment, no doubt, but it's really a continued commitment to excellence that the board has been funding and the district has been staffing in terms of new programming, with a focus, of course, closing opportunity gaps. Really, it starts with retaining high-quality teachers and high-quality staff to provide the services our scholars and families need. We talked about investing in 4K, very important. We go on from half-day to full-day 4K programs. Want to continue to invest in that area. Cindy also mentioned the 21 schools that have language immersion programs, Spanish and Hmong, in terms of the focus on multilingual education for preparing our students and families for a globalized workforce, critically important. And then last but definitely not least, the notion of a well-rounded education for our students, much more than just the classes on the schedules. It's about arts, it's about co-curricular activities, it's about clubs and activities, right? We want to modernize our school facilities to include open collaborative spaces, spaces that the community can utilize both after and before the school day. And so it's really a commitment to excellence in terms of helping us move forward in modernizing our school facilities. People always have to tell me to hold the mic up, so that's why I was just chuckling right there. Go ahead. All right, some specifics on that $100 million question. The $100 million question doesn't happen all at once. It's been scaffolded over 4 years. So the first year it's $30 million. That first year will have an average monthly impact of $26. The following year, year 2, fall of 2025, it goes up an additional $30 million, followed by $20 million in fall of 26, and another $20 million in the fall of 27. In the end, a total of $100 million in base building sustainable revenues to do the things that we've been talking about. In the end, when fully annualized, it becomes $87 a month for the property tax impact for the operations referendum. If you have questions as we're going around, the white note cards in front of you, you can jot those down. Jen will be picking them up if you have them, or you can hold them to the end. But I just want to remind you, go ahead and jot down your questions. We are going to have a question and answer session at the end. Because we're covering a lot of stuff. School finance can be complicated, so if you got some questions popping into your head, just write them down and then we'll get to them. So the facilities referendum, as I've said, is so much more than bricks and mortars, right? The facilities referendum is really the focus on education, making modern facilities with a focus on middle schools. Why middle schools? The board decided, working with the community back in 2020, when we were going to focus on the now completed 4 comprehensive high schools, Capitol High, one of our alternative high schools, that next on the list had to be our remaining high school, Shabazz High School, and middle schools, that we needed to modernize our middle schools. We needed to make spaces specific for STEM, arts, shared community spaces, improved libraries. Probably tonight's kind of a little bit of a reminder, upgraded HVAC and mechanicals in terms of air conditioning, and just better all around, more inviting, modern day facilities to be used for schools. All right, this slide talks about the $507 million over 23 years, and the facilities referendum will not have a tax impact until the fall of 2025. So no tax impact this fall. The reason that is, and when it comes into play fall of 2025, it'll be estimated to be about $27 a month on the average home in Madison, which is $457,300. We have a pretty cool tax calculator on our website that you can go to plug in, if you're a homeowner, the assessed value of your home, and it'll lay the numbers out for the 4 years of the referendum. There's 10 schools at 7 school sites, and because, much like Senate and La Follette, there are 2 separate schools, but one site. This is a little bit easier to differentiate between the two, but 10 schools, 7 sites. This is a map which is also really critically important to kind of understand how all the moving pieces of how to focus on our schools in terms of what comes first, right? Geographically located middle schools and elementary schools, a focus on middle schools, 2 high priority elementary schools, Anana and Crestwood, happen to be located on the west side, but happen to be 2 of the highest priority elementary schools that have significant mechanical, both HVAC and plumbing issues that we needed to move forward, in addition with the focus on middle schools. And so when we were looking at the plan for the board to make some recommendations, we looked at the facility condition report. Our focus was middle schools, the Shabazz High School, which I've mentioned. So Sherman Shabazz, depending on how you orient yourself to Madison, the northeast side, I guess, of the district of the city, that for sure we know is our #1 school. That is going to happen in terms of the first project that we engage in. Part of what we're doing now tonight here is to help gather input for the board to hear from us, the staff, on our recommendations on how we should implement over time the school sites. What do I mean by that? Although we're looking for approval to be able to start improving our school facilities, the actual construction would not begin until the spring of 2026. Our plan would be in the spring of 2026 to start focusing on 2 sites. One we know already, the Sherman Shabazz complex. The next, depending on some other factors that I want to talk about a little bit in terms of what helps us decide that. We'll do 2 sites a year. 2 sites could be 2 schools or 4 schools, depending if it's a middle elementary combination or a standalone school. I said construction won't begin until spring of 2026, which is really important for 2 reasons. Well, more than 2, but 2 primary reasons. One, it gives us an opportunity to continue to reach out to the school communities to get input from school staff and families of if the decision is made to build new, like the recommendation is for Senate, what explicitly does the community want, right? Which is why we're going to spend some time on these dream boards to continue to collect some information. But the point being, we have plenty of time to incorporate the needs of the staff and the families in each one of these areas. The other factor that will come into play in terms of choosing how we're going to phase in these 10 schools over this 5 years is this notion of swing space. Swing space, think of as a place to temporarily move kids for studying and for academic. Potentially 2 school years, maybe less, but potentially 2 school years. We've learned from our experts and working with other school districts that unlike the comprehensive high schools where we had construction over multiple years and students continued to attend, nobody believes we can do that for middle school or elementary schools. So we need to have spaces to move the student body to and staff as we build or do major renovations. And so the idea would be, for instance, if we build a new school at Senate, we would keep the existing school in place as the new school is built, then move Senate to the new school, but keep this space available potentially to move another school's population here. The other consideration is transportation, module or portable classrooms, right? So that's that notion of swing space. The decision, the recommendation to repair or build is really, I have to check my time, 1 moment please. I can get going for a while. I'm doing fine. I got 5 minutes. I'm doing fine. So back to repair and renovation. We used I call it a holistic or comprehensive view. There's definitely a mathematical formula to decide whether do we recommend renovating or building new. And that number that we picked was, if we looked at a facility with our experts, our team, construction experts, architects, folks that build schools, folks that build buildings, it was if the cost of renovation ended up being 60% or more to build a facility new, we leaned on the numbers side to build new, right? So that kind of went from a renovation to building new. Other important considerations were, do we have space? Like we have space near Senate to build a brand new school. We have space, Black Hawk and Gompers, to build a new school. So part of the decision to go with these 10 schools, middle school, alternative high school, was also the physical space of what was available when it came to build new or renovate. On the renovation side, the schools when we built new, the estimates are for a school that will last at least 50 years, right? So we're talking about building sustainable, green, architectural, solid school buildings, quality school buildings for modern academic standards. The schools that we recommended to renovate would have a useful life to 25 to 30 years after renovation, and no individual component, part, replacement, like a mechanical or anything else, no less than 10 years. At least bring it up to a 10-year standard. All right. I talked about this, but I want to spend a little bit more time on it, right? To really drive home that our facilities referendum is not just bricks and mortars. It's really about improving learning environments. Yes, getting air conditioning is critical. Having plumbing, mechanicals work, critical. But it's also about improved accessibility, improved security. Like when I grew up, we talk about this all the time. When I grew up, the offices were built in the center of the school and the classrooms were all outside so everyone could have windows in the classrooms and just bury the administrators in the middle of the school, right? Made total sense, I guess, 40, 50 years ago, but it doesn't in today's standards. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But improved safety and security, critical. And then I haven't spoke enough about it, but the board has a 2045 sustainability goal, 0 greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. So our plans include significant top-of-the-line geothermal, if the site allows, and many green energy sustainable building practices to lower our maintenance and ongoing costs, but also to have 0 greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. And I'll stress again about in terms of operational efficiencies. It costs a lot of money to maintain buildings that are 60 years old, a lot of money that we spend because it's necessary, but it could be more wisely spent in terms of providing better educational programming and investing in the schools that we have. All right, Senate Middle School. You have this before you. I can just look at the screen. I don't have to get my hard copy. So when you look at the 10 schools, and we have these for all of our schools, but there's 14 standards. These open squares are 14 standards. I've been talking about the mechanical HVAC and mechanical plumbing. The colors are blue to A. There's none that have A. And then F is this red. So the mechanicals for Senate, HVAC and plumbing, that's kind of where it starts. But the other areas in terms of accessibility, in terms of the green space, in terms of the year, in terms of useful life and facilities, 1967 this facility was built, 98,300 square feet. So the map on the right is the existing school and then the green space to the left, which becomes important on the next slide. Yes, okay. So just to orient yourself, here's you know where the stadium, this is La Follette High School, Flom Road, the existing school. This is that green space that we were looking at. Now, I'm gonna say right away, people look at these and say, I don't want the gym there, I want the gym over here. These are just a visual display that this is an area large enough to build a new school. I want to point out the geothermal field I talked about. So like the gold standard for sustainability is a full geothermal facility where you drill borings into the ground, use the heat of the earth to cool and heat your facilities. But you have to do drill borings to determine if it's going to be feasible or not. But regardless, we've budgeted to be able to do it. If we can't, then we'll go to the next tiers that work for each site with sustainability and focus in mind. This is my little reminder. I'll turn that off because now you can't take the mic away from me. Okay, I just want to go over this. Again, this is in front of you. I want to highlight a couple of really important things. Our classrooms were built to the standards of the day. 1967, the standards of the day were a certain thing. They call sit and get, right? The wise sage on the stage. But education is much different. It's collaborative, it's hands-on, it's mixed-use spaces, right? It's STEM and the arts. So this says the average is 710 right now. The recommendation is 900. A significant expansion of the library, significant expansion of the cafeteria, significant expansion of the gym and the use space. Overall, about 34,000 square feet increase would be the recommendation, from 98,000 to 132,000, right? It really drives home the point about modernizing our facilities for the day's needs of middle school kids and education. Okay. Got one more? Got a couple more? Yeah. So this is the specifics of Senate. $72 million to renovate, $89 million to build new in terms of the plans that we've recommended to the board. That was the difference between the two. You could do the math. It all comes in about 80% in terms of renovate to build new. But build new is our recommendation for Senate.
So I'm gonna, the opportunity here to talk you through sort of a dreaming phase. It's incredibly unusual, and there are so very few opportunities for school communities to design a brand new school, and we want to really maximize this opportunity and hope that we have that opportunity for you all this fall. We're going to think about different and specific areas, and I'd invite you to think about what exists here already around flexible classrooms, around gymnasium space, the cafeteria where students spend time between classes, the library, and also other things like accessibility, parts of the building that certain students can never get to. Safety and security, how students and visitors and families would enter the building to ensure secure entry, and as Bob mentioned, also sustainability. You have at your table pink and yellow Post-it notes, and I want to sort of differentiate those both for you and ask you to use the Sharpies at your table to write some things on as I work my way through these boards. On the pink, you're writing things that you like or appreciate and that you would like to be the same, meaning we have this, we want to make sure we have that again as we design a new building. So pink is for things you want to stay the same or want to make sure that they exist in the new design. The yellow Post-it notes are for things that you would like to be different, things that you see in these images that you've seen in other schools that you don't have now that you would like to be included. So again, pink is for things that should stay the same, yellow are things that you would like added into your design. At the end of the presentation, I'll ask you to then go put those up kind of by the picture that represents that thing you either want to keep or add. We'll take pictures of those, and then all the Post-it notes are pulled back together to document. So starting with flexible and collaborative spaces, we're in the business of instruction. How can spaces be leveraged to help our students learn more effectively? Flexible spaces that allow for different kinds of teaching and learning than we've had or been able to do in the past. Seeing students use spaces in ways we're not used to seeing in our more traditional spaces. And so I'll work my way through a variety of slides here. So on this slide, you can see students have a variety of seating, and they have places where they can collaborate and work together outside of classrooms and in common areas. Next slide. Here you can see how we have spaces for students to hang out. We have a whiteboard here so students collaborate, cafe height tables for students to have a separate conversation while in that same area. You can also see natural light as a fixture in some of these spaces. Next slide. Here you can see one example of how larger common areas can be included, and you see what's referred to as a social stair. If any of you have toured Bell Phillips Memorial since their renovation, they have one of these in what used to be a courtyard at the school. You can also see other flexible areas for seating. You have walkways up above, and these spaces can also be used after the school day for performances, presentation, and focus on the arts. Next slide. Here you can see how carpeting can be different colors to designate different classroom spaces, different age groups, different grade levels. You also have glass walls that can be closed to create smaller instructional areas, opened up to create more flexible use of a much larger space. Again, you see different kinds of seating that create spaces for individual students, small groups, or large groups. Here again, you can see different kinds of a more traditional, sort of modernized individual student desk. And here you can also see where there's sort of a smaller isolated area of whiteboards where groups of students could go in and work separately. Back here, the same thing. So you could have students break into groups and break into those areas separately. Here you can see how you have bright colors, again, natural light coming into the space, and then furniture that's tied to those spaces to sort of create sense of identity in different parts of the building. Next slide. This is another example of how flexible seating can be incorporated into a common area. This could be a classroom, this could be a cafeteria, there's a sink over here, there's a place to put slides up here, and then wherever we have ceilings that are a little bit higher, then there would be treatments to make sure that sound still travels the way that it should in those large areas to prevent echoing. Next slide. This is an image of a space that is in our Southside Elementary on Madison Southside in that new school, where in what used to just be a common area, creating a smaller space where a teacher can meet with a small group of students, do some targeted instruction. Students could meet, gather, and then you can see that there's whiteboards integrated in that space to again facilitate teaching. Moving on, let's talk about accessibility. we want to make sure that our spaces are inclusive and welcoming and are tightly tied to the sort of school culture and climate that we want to create, ensuring universal design so that every single person that comes to our school buildings feels they belong and can access all of our spaces. Next slide. Here you can see a ramp allowing students to sort of seamlessly transition from one level to the next, and then you have flexible seating in a variety of levels, again with integrated panels that can be used for instruction. Next slide. Again, another example of a ramp that currently could be just a flight of stairs, but you carve out a little bit of extra space and make that a ramp so that it becomes ADA compliant. Next slide. Here you can see open bathrooms and accessible sinks. Again, drinking fountains at different levels, but most of the bathrooms in our new high schools don't have doors and are open, sort of airport style. Most new schools are designed in that way, again, creating more flexible use. Next slide. Moving on, talking again more specifically about classroom spaces. We want our teachers and staff to create thriving learning environments, and they need spaces that support them in doing that. Different desk options, multiple learning spaces. We talked again about flexible sized groupings, either from the large group down to individual student. We'll work our way through a couple slides here. Especially in our high schools, you see some of this where you have some tables and desks that are a little bit higher and some that are lower to sort of naturally create different groupings within a classroom space. Next slide. Here you can see different, again, use of different colors in a classroom to sort of designate different learning areas. Again, large windows and natural light. Next slide. Here's another example where you have integrated sort of counters that allow you to do lab space, a space for the teacher, and again, a lot of natural light. Next slide. In our high schools, that we've developed with a focus on maker spaces and STEM, integrating sort of larger lab, flexible spaces that can be used in ways that a traditional classroom can't and where previous facilities did not allow. Again, creating larger spaces with an emphasis on hands-on learning that can be used in a variety of different ways. Next slide. This is an example of an art space, and so you can see how use of stools, a much higher ceiling. You've got, again, sinks integrated into the space. You have lots of storage. These tables, again, can be pushed together to create sort of one larger collaborative area. Next slide, please. Here's a lab space that has new technology like 3D printers. You've got a sliding glass wall that allows students to experience a classroom setting maybe one day, and then the next day they go to the other side. Next slide. And this is what it looks like on the other side of that wall, where then again we have more of a lab space. You have electricity hanging down from the ceiling here, allowing those spaces to be used more flexibly. Everything's on wheels, so the teacher can work with students from day to day to shift up how the classroom is structured. And then you also have integrated dust control and electricity that supports equipment. Again, not only the glass sliding walls, but also a lot of natural light into these spaces as well. Next slide. Another space that just shows, again, integrated sinks, stools, things on wheels, again, electricity from the ceiling, and then large glass windows for natural light. Next slide. One more example of something like a Lego table, so that spaces that are designed specifically to foster creativity. Again, lots of windows. You can see over into the library here, which also helps just having line of sight so that a teacher can supervise students in a variety of spaces. But again, be using the space in a more productive way. Next slide. One more example, you can see here what looked like booths in a restaurant. This could be a cafeteria, this could be a collaborative space. This is what it could look like if it's raining and we're not going outside after lunch. Just space where people could play cards, get together, study, etc. Next slide. Thinking about libraries, here we are. Libraries are sort of the heart of literacy and where we want students to hang out, love picking up books and working their way through them. We also want them to be shared spaces that are sort of collectively owned by all the teachers of the school and they're comfortable bringing their classrooms in. Next slide. Again, very colorful, lots of natural light. If you've been in the libraries of, again, our new high schools, they look more like this with all sorts of flexible seating around the edges and as much natural light as possible. Next slide. Fun shapes for bookshelves, again, to sort of create different areas within the library. Over on the right, you can see more flexible seating at different heights. Again, lots of natural light and windows. Next slide. Here you can see again lots of natural light, another cubby area. Again, the purpose of this and these light fixtures, just to sort of inspire some of your thinking around how spaces could look and where you would like to be, where you'd like your children to be. Next slide. Again, use of colors. Here you can see the colors are here. You have a bright wall, and then you have lots of different bookshelves in different places and lots of natural light. Next slide. Commons and cafeteria. Where we want students to come together, building friendships outside the classroom, and we need spaces where they feel comfortable and included. Next slide. Again, you can, in a lot of our schools, the cafeteria is also sort of the space where we would do performances. And so this is also a place where we can feature the arts, but during the day, the tables were allowed and this becomes the cafeteria. Treatments at the, up on the ceiling to sort of prevent sound from bouncing around. Again, lots of natural light and a classroom that overlooks the cafeteria. Next slide. This is another example of the cafeteria where you switch it around and students go in to get their food and turn around, and then where they would actually sort of check out a little bit more in the open space to create a different feel as opposed to having to sort of work their way in to check out. Next slide. This is, I believe, Southside Elementary again. So you have large glass doors that open up, creating a much larger cafeteria space, and then you can close these back down to sort of separate those, and they could be used as a classroom space or pull a couple of classrooms together to collaborate in a different way. Next slide. One more showing how wood elements can be used. Again, natural light kind of in all of these pictures. You see another performance space here, but you also see all of the wood treatment in the ceiling. Let's move on to gymnasiums. We'll start with a picture of Southside Elementary. Again, things that are consistent throughout these slides. Lots of bright colors on accent walls, lots of glass. Again, here's more bright colors and lots of natural light in these spaces. Keep going. Another example of what could be a performance space, we could have a movie night here. You have accessibility with a ramp to get back up on the stage. Lots of flexible use, including curtains that drop down to separate spaces so that we can have different classes on different sides or activities going on in a large space that for a larger game could be opened up and you have competition throughout the entire space. 54% of our students district-wide are involved in co-curricular activities. We want to make sure that we're thinking beyond sort of the regular school day into what students do after school in the evening to stay engaged in our school communities. Monitored and controlled entry, we want to also be mindful of safety as we work our way through it. So I'll show you a couple of examples of what some of those safe entries could look like. Here you have students who are entering and checking in the building that way and then are buzzed in. Next slide. This is another example that shows a double entry so that students coming in after school starts would come in, go into the Welcome Center and check in, and then into the school building. Students who are leaving go out through both of those doors. If you think about your entries the way that they are now, when it's cold outside and the doors are open and all the students are streaming in, the building will drop temperature 10 or 15 degrees in that area until everybody's in, the school day starts, and then it slowly warms its way back up. All of our high schools have been redesigned with double entries to make them more energy efficient. Next slide. Here's another example of how you can use the architecture to sort of help create a more welcoming common entry point so you can see from across the way when you're driving up and visitors would know exactly where they're coming. Signage and again, architectural features that make the school building and the school community unique. Next slide. Sustainability. We've touched on this a few times, but also just wanting to make sure that we want the building to last for a very long time, and in order to do that, we also want it to be sort of energy efficient and sustainable in ways that our current buildings are not. Let's look at a couple of examples. Again, here you can see use of sort of wide open spaces that allow for air to move pretty freely. You also have cathedral ceilings in different places that allow for air to move around, and then again, using lots of natural light, both up above and down below, reducing the amount of lighting that we need in the space. Next slide. And this again is back to Southside Elementary with a little bit of a green roof, a big skylight, and an outdoor classroom where teachers can meet. So let's shift back to our Post-it notes. Again, ideally you have your pink ones where you're writing down things that you like or would like to keep. On your yellow, you're writing down things that maybe you saw here that you would like added in that you don't have. And if you end up with things on either Post-it note, whatever you have, put it over here. We'll be able to make sense of it. Before we get up and sort of open this up into a little bit more of a Q&A forum to interact, mingle around, look at these pictures, and dialogue a little bit, I wanted to put up the QR code, if we could. So as we sort of wrap up the formal presentation this evening, I want to thank you for your engagement and for being here. I know there's a lot of information to process, but we value you taking the time out of your evening to come and sort of hear from us, learn a little bit more about what we're hoping to do for our school communities. Before you go, if you could use your phone to submit this survey, that would be great. But at this time, we're also just going to open it up and allow you to put your Post-it notes on these boards, talk with each other, and talk with us. Go ahead.